Hey everyone, my name's Gunther and welcome back to Ottawa Zoo, where we're taking a food court from this and turning it into this, which really I think is just a huge improvement and it fits the theme of Ottawa Zoo so much better. Now, if you're liking the content, feel free to subscribe. It'll definitely help the channel to grow, but of course I want you to remember there's no pressure to do so. By now, you know how this works. We're going to start with a fresh, clean slate by tearing down all of that old work. And for the first time ever, we're actually going to remove some of the work we've completed in one of our redevelopment episodes, which is really just some foliage, but have no fear. We're going to come back with an even better foliage look. We're going to get rid of that mulch, and I think it's going to look a little bit more realistic and lifelike, which I'm always a big fan of. Now, if you're not new to the channel, you're going to definitely recognize that this is not the first food court we've built. Of course, we have Ottawa Zoo, that first food court you saw at the very beginning of this episode, which it's not great, let's be honest here. We also have Oasis Zoo, where we built something pretty extravagant. It was like this whole alleyway. It was really cool and fun to build, but we didn't really get to enjoy it. And then we have Cedarbrook Park Zoo, where we built like a more modular design. So each of them have their benefits, but I will say my favorite of all of them is actually going to be this rebuild. And I think part of the reason why is we're taking everything that we've learned in all of our other food courts and we're building something that's going to combine all of that to create something truly unique. Now, for our build today, we're going to work on 3 different buildings. And the idea behind having 3 different buildings is I wanted to have something that was going to be spread out. We're going to have a lot of foliage that we can build up around it. It's going to give that idea that we're in the midst of a forest in Canada. And that's kind of the overarching theme for our entire zoo, is a mixture of both nature and these really cool exhibits. So as you can tell, we've already started work on our first building, which really is only going to have one restaurant in it, a chief beef of all things, but we're also going to add in a staff rest area in the back end. This is going to allow our staff in the area to kind of focus on resting in here. We're not going to have our vendors running around all wild and stuff like that, which ultimately means that we can bring more happiness to our guests because we are lacking from that perspective. Now, there is one thing about this build I want to call out, which is the liberal use of this Planet Zoo wall trim piece. I love the way this piece looks. I've used it before, but not as an actual wall trim piece. And I will say, after some liberal use of this trim, I'm really kind of impressed with the way it works. And it marries really well with all the natural wood colors. Now, part of the joy of building in Planet Zoo, and I mentioned this in the past, is you have the freedom to make mistakes. And I think this is a perfect example of it. Initially, I went with this slate roof. I loved the way it looked in our skunk habitat, so I wanted to emulate it here before I realized it just didn't really fit the entire build. And same for the awning that you see. I built it really quickly, I liked it initially, and as time goes by and as you build these new, better things, you realize that sometimes your first try just isn't right. And that means you can take it all away and replace it with something that you're gonna like a little bit better. Now, I added a little bit of dash of green with our conservation roof panels. Love the way those look, and I kind of called it good on that first build. Moving on to our second build of the day, we're gonna start focusing on our restroom block. Now, there's a few things with this restroom block that we're gonna focus on. Right off the bat is we've made it a little bit larger, and this acts as twofold. Realistically, your washroom is not going to be a 4 meter by 4 meter square. It's actually going to be quite large. There needs to be room for quite a few different amenities. So I wanted to create a building that's going to be a little bit larger. And I also added a second restroom block. This gives the idea that there's 2 blocks that you can enter based off of what you feel best suits you. And it allows for more realism associated with this build. Now, I will admit, Ottawa Zoo is not a very realistic zoo. We saw that with our reindeer habitat, our bison habitat, where our guests can get super close. But that doesn't mean that we can't start practicing the skills today to prepare for a more realistic zoo in the future. So keep that in mind. When you're building something, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but challenge yourself to build something bigger and better to prepare for what it's going to look like in the future. To cap off this build, we're going to place 3 doors. 2 are going to act as entrances to our restroom blocks, and a third door is going to act as an entrance to a backstage area, which is really just going to focus on some power and water elements. With those completed, I felt it was time to spruce this building up and give it a little bit of additional life. So to help out with that, we started off utilizing a few of our sign pieces, in this case some of the tree pieces, as well as a liberal amount of leaves to kind of create these faux trees. And pretty surprising how it turned out, and it just goes to show sometimes you just got to get outside of your comfort zone and try building something new and unique. Now, speaking of something outside of my comfort zone and new and unique, I want to take a moment to just thank everybody who has subscribed and made this channel the way it is. For those who don't know, just recently we hit that 1,000 milestone. And that's something I never really thought was ever going to happen. So I do want to say thank you so much for all the support you've shown me. And thank you for joining me on this journey as we build up our skills playing Planet Zoo. I hope you've learned something from these series, and I hope you continue to take away things as well moving forward. That being said, we're not going to stop here. We're going to continue to play Planet Zoo together, among some other games, things like that. So I encourage you, if you have a recommendation for another game, drop it in the comments or connect with me. We're always open to hearing new games, new ideas, everything like that. Always excited to play and have fun with our community. So, calling our second building good, it's time to move on to the third and final building for this entire food court area. For this one, we're focusing specifically and solely on food surfaces. Initially, our first building, while it looks amazing, can only provide one type of food. That's not enough to feed all of our hungry guests, so it's time for us to diversify a little bit and create something more. Now, the good news with building multiple buildings is as you get used to and familiar with your building style, things become just that much faster. And I think this is a prime example of what's happening here. We're putting this third building together in record time, and that's exactly what we want to see, because that means that we're getting more comfortable and better at building. Now, speaking of getting better at building, let's talk a little bit about foliage. Now, you've seen the journey that we have had when it comes to foliage. We built some pretty god-awful things, some pretty interesting things, and we're slowly building a new type of technique that suits my needs. And keep that in mind. You're gonna see all these amazing builds from these amazing content creators, and you're gonna be like, hey, I can do that too. But that's okay if you don't, because you're gonna build your own techniques over time. And I think this is a prime example of what we're gonna do. With the initial third building finally done, we just added that roof on, it's time for us to work on foliage, and I'm really excited to kind of show you this view. So as always, we're gonna start with some buffalo grass, we're gonna add in some bushes, and then finally we're gonna add in some trees. And really, these three easy steps, as you can see, create a much better, more cohesive food court that really fits with the entire theme of Ottawa Zoo. And lastly, of course, we have that centerpiece, and we're gonna do the same 3 steps, add in our buffalo grass, add in some bushes, and finally add in some trees, and we're gonna call it good from a foliage perspective. Now, the last step of this entire build is gonna be a little bit of what I like to call beautification. And really what that means is adding in some signs, adding in some awnings, and additional small features that are gonna use up a lot of that dead space that we're seeing. Now, don't get me wrong, this build looks great as it is. But sometimes you just want to add on some additional layers. You're going to add a little bit of additional texture, flavor, everything like that. And this is what's going to take your build from one level all the way to the next. And it's going to create something that you're going to be a little bit happier with and make it look a little bit nicer. And it's not a whole lot of work. So don't be afraid to experiment with a lot of the decoration pieces. And I think this is a great example. Our guest-facing kitchen is looking a little empty, and it's time we fill that in. So utilizing various pieces from the Conservation and India pack, we can create a more lived-in space. It's going to be a little bit more realistic, and truthfully, it's going to add more flavor to the overall build. And sometimes it just takes a few extra pieces. Now, keep in mind, Planet Zoo has a ton of individual pieces that you can select from. So if you haven't found what you're looking for, sometimes it's best just to take a step back, look at your overall build, and then try to look for a new piece again. Sometimes it's going to be a piece that you wouldn't have thought about utilizing, such as a fence, that's going to make all the difference to your entire build. Now, with our whole beautification process finally coming to an end, it is that time to take a live tour. And I always encourage you guys to take a tour of all of your builds, because it's amazing what you can see. So with that, let's dive in. And with those final few pieces placed, it is time for us to take a live tour of our new and improved food court. And where better to start than the entrance, now with directional signs, letting us know where we need to go to get around the zoo. And I'm actually ashamed that I've never used these before. Such a small piece and super impactful. I love the way these look. And of course, I finally settled on the name Mount Bison for our new bison habitat. Super happy with that name. I think it fits really well. Of course, we have our foliage, which is following our new three-step process, which is really buffalo grass, some bushes, and then trees. And you can't really go wrong with the way that looks. And it's really random, and I'm kind of happy with how it works. Now, you are going to notice we don't have any picnic tables, and that's by design. I actually didn't really want to see picnic tables in this area. It would have added even more congestion to our food court area, so I'm quite happy not having them here. Now you're going to notice a few additional small details like this path heading into the back. We actually have some doors going into the back of each of our food areas, and I love the way this would add some realism to the overall build. I'm sad that they don't use it, but I love the way it works. And of course, utilizing the workshop, found these really cool pieces. You've actually seen me use these in our reindeer habitat, which is some lockers for our staff, and then just a cork board for us to kind of put up schedules and health and safety stuff, all that. It's required to kind of run restaurants in the food service industry. Of course, one of my favorite things is actually utilizing these vents and these fences to kind of add a little bit more variety to the walls. It fills up a lot of the dead space, and I actually think it looks really cool. I also layered on some LED tubes. We have some additional lighting around the area, and I love the way it looks. Even those like trim pieces turned out really well, mixed in with the pre-made awnings and stuff like that. I'm really happy with how this kind of turned out. And I love these little signs. We have Monsieur Fruits and Gulpy. I love them. Of course, we have some of these like educational signs as well. I like to think that you would want to read these maybe while some of your friends or family are using the restrooms. You can kind of read up about the area on some foliage, things like that. And then as you're waiting for them to come. Now, of course, when you get into the restroom block, we have like maybe a health and safety sign reminding people to wash their hands, things like that, which are always important. We want to make sure that health and safety is number one. But one of my favorite pieces, and shocked how it turned out, and even watching it after the fact, I'm pretty amazed with what I built. And it was kind of on a whim, which are these trees with all these leaves and the flowers and stuff like that. And I just think it looks really cool. Kind of gaudy at the same time, but still really cool. And I'm really happy with the way it looks. Now, as we head into the back area, despite the fact that one thing is broken, we do have a working, somewhat water purifier, and we also have a transformer, because power and water are important. Not only is our food court, but also our bears require it. So I think it's super important. Now, as we kind of head over here, we have our final building, which arguably is going to be our most important. We have our kitchen. And I love the way this kitchen turned out. And we're going to take a quick look on the inside. But even adding these vents on the top and then just adding some more of these fences on the bottom made it look really cool. And then I love how you have so much variety that you can utilize all these pieces for. So when we head through the doors, we have like some back entrances and stuff like that. But there's quite a bit of variety. I didn't put anything on this side. You're not really going to see it from here. But when you look at it from this side, it almost reminds me of Booster Juice. I love Booster Juice. When I used to work in the malls, I used to have it on a lunch when we used to work in sales. And if you're kind of on the go, you would grab a Booster Juice and kind of drink it under the table while you're trying to sell people some stuff. So that is not a world I want to go back to, but it is what we had to do. Of course, in the backstage area, we have a whiteboard, which is a little bit more important because maybe we need to set up feeding plans, things like that, because through the back door here, we have a boardwalk that leads to our skunk habitat, which I love the way the boardwalk looks, and I added in some autumn tree leaves. Now, I realize the tree leaves don't make sense. There's no trees here that are actually shedding trees during the fall leading into the winter. So it's not realistic, but I felt the colors just added a little bit more to our entire area. So I think it works, and we're just gonna make believe that the leaves just gather here for some reason. Maybe we transport them via bag and they kind of act as like a natural fertilizer or mulch or something like that for the ground. But that's it. That's our quick and easy tour of our brand new build. It's pretty amazing the amount of work that you put into building something and how fast you can kind of roll through it. But I am super amazed with how this turned out. Now that's it. That's everything for this food court episode. We've built quite a few food courts, but I gotta say this is probably the best we've done yet. And that makes sense. As you build something and then you go back and build it again, things naturally get a little bit better. And I'm really happy with how this turned out. Of course, this wouldn't have been possible without your support, your feedback, all of your words, and helping me to become a better Planet Zoo architect. It's all thanks to you guys, and I really appreciate that. I can't say that enough. I mentioned it earlier, our channel's finally hit 1,000 subscribers, and again, that's a milestone that I didn't think was going to be happening. I did this for fun. It was a way to challenge me to be better and to play a game that I hadn't really played. I bought it since day one, but I never really played it, and I was kind of ashamed about that. And this entire series kind of encouraged me to go back through and play it. So if you're interested in talking more Planet Zoo, feel free to join our community. There's a link in the description below. We're always welcoming and looking for new people to join our community. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you again so much for all of your support. And as always, ciao for now, everybody.